Let's say that you're playing a KOF game. It doesn't have to be KOF 15 though, although I will mostly talk about 15 for this video. It can be any KOF, whether it's KOF 98 in Fightcade or the modern ones, doesn't matter. You got your team, you practice some combos, and you jumped right into a match. As soon as the match starts, you see your opponent jumping in all sorts of directions and you can't quite follow what they're doing. Then suddenly you get hit by one of their dozens of jumping attacks and they don't stop. You try to mash buttons and you're the one who gets hit. And if you block for too much, your guard gauge disappears and you eat a whole ass combo. And even when you do try to jump, your opponent hits you out of the air and jumps yet again. Or let's say that you saw something similar in a high-level KOF match. It could be from a YouTube replay channel, maybe you were watching EVO or any high-level tournament, and you saw that both players were jumping and not playing so much on the ground. After either or both of these experiences, you come to a conclusion that goes along the lines of this game is a jumping fest, or even this game is neutral, or even the game in general is random. And after all, if a game is so random, why would you bother learning it? That is, unless you like randomness in fighting games, of course. Now, before I answer that claim, I want to ask the people that make such claims, which are all understandable by the way, to look at the two of the most prominent players in KOF's history, Xiaohai and ET. These players have been consistently playing the franchise and getting one of, if not the best results, in the series' competitive history. How is it possible that a game is so random, but at the same time have consistent competitive players? And this is not only said for Xiaohai and ET, look at Violent Kane, Tamago, Lokov, and many other players all around the world that have consistent results in the competitive scene. You might just say that they're just better at being random. I like to point out that the game has several movement options, including hops, hyper hops, jumps, hyper jumps, rolls, walking, dashing. And it also has 58 characters, with more coming, by the way, and many more mechanics that add a ton of depth to the game. To say that those players are just better at being random is kind of the equivalent of even accepting the possibility of several people winning the lottery consistently, excluding the rich cases of course. Is it possible? Well, I would argue that the chances of that happening are so low that I might as well just say that that's just impossible. With these many variables that should be taken into account when playing a game and performing consistently, I just find it hard to believe that they just throw out random moves and jumps and coincidentally, they just happen to be right most of the time. You need to understand that KOF has a different set of fundamentals than most fighting games where movement options play a big part when it comes to neutral. And especially in KOF 15, that's the most important part. So it's normal that if you're getting into KOF, but you come from other fighting games, even watching it at a high level can be confusing. But let me assure you that, proven by the players I spoke about earlier, the game does not only have neutral, but also every movement has a reason and counterplay to it. In this video, I don't want to just tell you that KOF's neutral is not random, but to also explain it, give an analysis of a full high-level match where I'll explain what's happening in the neutral game and some other mechanics, and give some beginner tips of situations that might have happened to you when you played KOF against another player. Keep in mind that there are so many videos giving way more details about KOF's neutral and that work basically in any KOF. I'll leave some of them in the description below, but my highest recommendation is this one from DanDJ that explains the basics of KOF's neutral and more, but I'll explain this in this video regardless. To address the elephant in the room, you might have seen this type of short jump or hop in KOF. And you also noticed that this is the most prevalent move that people use when they're playing the game. This is because hops, at least compared to jumps, are hard to react to at least to anti-air. In some cases, even if you do end up anti-airing them, and they did a blowback attack, which I'll explain later, don't worry, you end up trading with them, but you got pushed away and closer to the corner and you end up taking more damage. Blocking them can be hard for some players at the beginning, but trust me, they will get easier to block with practice and experience. There's two types of hops, and the same goes for jumps, normal ones and hyper ones. Normal ones travel shorter than the hyper ones, and both are effective to establish a strong offense. You use normal hops for shorter distances according to where the opponent is positioned. Now I want you to take a look at this example. If I do a short hop and attack the opponent as I'm landing, I get a full combo. But if I do a hyper hop, I'll end up crossing up the opponent, and since this character Shunei doesn't get a cross up with his hops, he can get punished on his landing. This is why it's important to measure the space in this game even with your jumps, as one false move can get you highly punished for it. Normal hops can also help you to bait anti-airs by getting in just the right space to punish them. Both normal and hyper hops are also good for mixing the opponent up, as in some cases it can confuse the opponent which version you are doing. In this example, Isla is doing a left-right mix, where if she does a normal hop, she gets on the same side, and if she hyper hops, she gets a cross-up. Now let's talk about jumps. Naturally, jumps travel a way further distance than hops, but of course are most vulnerable and reactable. There are moments where doing a hop over a projectile can evade it, but you don't get that optimal punish. However, if you do a jump, you can if it's timed properly. Mixing both hyper and normal jumps can also help you in left-right mix-ups. Take a look at this example with Orochi Shermie, where after a hard knockdown, she gets the same side jumping with a normal jump, and a cross-up after a hyper jump. Before I go over the grounded movement, it's important to know that in this game there are normal attacks and blowback attacks, both grounded and in the air. When it comes to air combat, which is very important in this game, normal jumping attacks help you if you want a quick air-to-air attack or a jumping combo attack. Now blowback attacks, while they don't exactly give you a combo on landing, they are usually slower, so they are more susceptible to get countered, but also have a different hitbox and have enhanced properties on both hit and on block. On hit, they push the opponent away, and if you manage to get a counter hit, it allows you to get a juggle. On block, they are usually way more plus and deal more guard damage than normal jumping attacks. Keep in mind that these attacks, at least depending on the character, can whiff if they are done too early after jumping, where then the opponent can just crouch and punish. But of course, the mind game relies on if they crouch early and do the right read. But if they don't, and you stay crouched, you are at the risk of getting hit by a normal, well-timed jumping attack into the full combo. Now, the grounded movement in KOF consists mainly on walking, running, and backdashing. While you would be tempted to just run if you want to close the gap between you and the opponent, keep in mind that, at least in this game, there's a certain recovery after you run, so you cannot run and block immediately, but you can do it after walking though. Also keep in mind that if you run and jump or hop immediately, you'll get a hyper version, so keep that in mind as you might get an accidental hyper jump or hop where what you wanted is a normal version of the jump. Walking can help you to stun your ground, and if your opponent is backdashing and hopping or jumping back, while they back off, they are also pushing themselves closer to the corner and gives you more room and time to react if they decide to go in. And of course, backdash is a quick defensive move that helps you create more space between you and the opponent, and it helps you evade command grabs and lows as well. Keep in mind though that getting hit on backdashes counts as a corner hit that can lead to big damage. Think of the KOF Zone as an imaginary box that stays in the middle of the screen. Outside of it, attacks and movement are easier to react to and is where most people rather be when they don't want to take a risk. This is why when you're watching a high-level KOF match, you see people jumping in and out. Jumping forward again means that they start to enter the KOF Zone, where reactions will be harder and the risk-reward interactions will be much stronger. Now let's explain what happens inside the KOF Zone. Since the distance is shorter, this is where the offensive options are much stronger, especially hops. Here is where the classic KOF triangle comes into play, and it goes like this. Hops beat low attacks, like crouching light or heavy kicks, standing attacks beat hops, and low attacks beat standing attacks. Since reaction times are limited once inside the KOF Zone, attacks and movement options will mostly be preemptive. This is why conditioning plays a big part in KOF's neutral. Altering each option helps to keep each player confused as to what comes next, and why just spamming blowback attacks and something of the sort doesn't always work. This is especially true since countering hop attacks from the ground with something so simple as a jab, unlike in jumps, it triggers a counter hit that, as I said before, it allows for air juggles and can lead to big damage. Now of course, these aren't the only options. Of course, you can always block the incoming attacks and play more defensively. You can always use an invulnerable attack like a Dragon Punch to prevent both grounded and air attacks. You can use KOF's 15 unique move called Shatter Strike that costs a bar, has armor frames, and can work as a combo launchers on hit, and you get half a bar back if it does. You can run up throw if the opponent is playing too defensively, use a jump instead of a hop to get a cross up, and many options more. The possibilities are endless, especially since each character has different attacks and movement options, each with their own unique combos, ways to play neutral, normals, and other unique traits. Each decision that is made once a KOF match starts needs to be taken into account to start conditioning opponents and win neutral, since everything has a reason behind it and it also has counterplay with meaning and consequences and a good balance between risk and reward. While I agree that it's not as reactive as other games like Street Fighter, where you walk back and forward, checking jumps and whiff punishing the opponent, this game is much faster paced, and it has its own set of fundamentals where movement and conditioning is the most important part in neutral. Of course, blocking and invulnerable moves aren't your only ally when it comes to defensive moves. In this game, there's also rolls, guard cancels, and even throws that are strong in KOF 15 when used effectively for defense. Rolls can be done both forward and backward and are invulnerable from the very first frame. However, it should be known that those can get grabbed during the entire animation and can also be punished, so be careful when using them. These are very effective to get out of tricky situations where an opponent can't or at least will have a very difficult time punishing them. This is especially true for back rolls. Forward rolls can sound riskier, but they are also useful when getting jumped in, as they end up putting the opponent in the other side and can mess the opponent's pressure game, especially in the corner. For one bar, a player can use this move during a block stun that is mostly used to get out of pressure and sometimes even turn the tables of a match. There's two types of guard cancels, rolls and blowback cancels. The roll ones are very similar to the ones I talked about previously, however they cannot be punished nor thrown. These are helpful to punish opponents that like to special cancel a normal if read correctly, especially if they like to use pressure with projectiles. This is especially the case for guard cancel forward roll. Guard cancel back roll is mostly used to get out of pressure and establish more space between you and the opponent, and so it is normally considered less risky than the forward one. Guard cancel blowback, however, pushes the opponent away and it's mostly used if you want to reset neutral or keep the opponent in the corner if they are close to it. Keep in mind though that it can be blocked and punished. While throws are mostly used in fighting games to open up blocking opponents, in KOF 15 are really strong as a defensive tool. This is not only because they are one frame and therefore can interrupt attacks of opponents that are too close, but also because when you wake up from the ground, you cannot get grabbed for a few frames, but your opponent can though, giving you an extra option to turn the tables of a match if the opponent mistimes their melee attack or throw. And also helps you prevent empty low attacks and throws, but I will talk about grabs and the options selects of grabs in another video. Be aware, however, that there's a new mechanic that's been added to KOF 15 which is called Advanced Strike. With the cost of half a bar, players can use this move that will cause a crumple if the opponent attempts a throw, and that is also plus a block. This also gives your meter back unless it whiffs. So beware of using throws defensively when considering this option. In another video, I'll talk more in depth regarding this mechanic, but I'll leave in the description below some links to help you understand this mechanic better. Whenever you get hit into a soft knockdown, if you press the roll input as soon as you land, you will make a quick recovery kind of roll that is completely invulnerable. This makes your opponent have less time to set up their offense after they knock you down, but also altering it and not doing it can sometimes help mess up the timing of your opponent's middies and safeties, giving you room to wake up with a reversal sometimes even. As I mentioned, hops can be countered with standing attacks, but be sure to test with your team, as some characters have different ways to deal with hops. Some attacks like flash kicks or dragon punches can be fast and have invulnerability against air attacks, these being the light versions. The heavy versions usually have complete invulnerability but are slower though. There are good preemptive options that you can do to stand your ground and prevent your opponent from rushing in. Using neutral or back hops and jumps are helpful as they are difficult to punish, and are effective to catch opponents jumping in or running on you. Keep in mind though that each has a different counter. For example, full neutral jump attacks cover more vertical distance, but opponents can run under them and punish you on your landing frames. Neutral hop attacks are way harder to low profile, but are susceptible against full jump incoming attacks. Walking back and backdashing are also helpful to give yourself some space and study how your opponent likes to move, and so you can start thinking of a counterplay depending on how they play. Also, even though there is a guard gauge in this game that can open you up for big damage if it gets depleted, don't be afraid to block. Just blocking an attack won't be the end of the world, and you'll still have plenty of bar left once you start blocking your opponent. Conditioning also plays a big part once in pressure, as there are not that many options that are completely true and have a defensive counter strategy. Just be sure to know when you should press to stop an opponent that keeps jumping in, when to block if they tend to go in for a block string after a jumping attack, and how to use grabs to your advantage. In the corner, pressure can be hard to deal with since the space between you and the opponent is much shorter. Forward rolls can help you when timed with your opponent's hops and jumps. Back rolls are also helpful in mid-screen when you think you are far from your opponent and it will be difficult for them to grab you, but they still can be hard read, so be careful. And finally, don't be afraid to use your meter. Guard cancels I mentioned earlier are really helpful to get out of pressure and give you an extra chance of winning the round. This is probably because of 3 reasons. Either your opponent is doing a button that's faster than yours, you did a button that wasn't good as an anti-air option or an air-to-air option, or your opponent is pressing jumping attacks preemptively because they are reading you. For the first scenario, remember that air blowback and heavy attacks aren't your only options. Characters have 4 types of air normals, each with a different purpose. While it is true that there are characters that have an air normal that works for multiple scenarios, I'm looking at you, Clark, that doesn't mean that you should do just one attack with your character. Jumping light attacks, both punch and kick, are useful to air-to-air opponents, and you can also jump and attack preemptively if you read their jump. For the second scenario, sometimes there are attacks that are good for jumping in a grounded opponent, but not so good as an air-to-air attack. Here's an example of Isla doing her jumping heavy punch attack that is super useful to attack grounded opponents, but you see the same whiffing against a full jumping opponent. Had Isla done maybe her light punch attack, it would have hit the opponent. So, similar as the previous advice, don't just autopilot one air button. As for opponents that jump and attack almost immediately, remember what I said earlier that in those cases you can completely crouch and punish their landing. There are attacks, however, that do hit crouched characters, so be sure to test it out. You can also use your back hops or jumps to do a safer air attack and contest the airspace effectively. This is probably because of the safe jump OS. If you're confused with the terms I just said, I'll leave in the description below the fighting game glossary in which you can look for the definitions of said terms. But to give a very brief explanation, this is a situation that happens normally after a knockdown, in which the opponent will make a jumping attack that is a setup to hit you if you block, grab you if you roll, and block if you DP. I will give another video explaining how this works in detail, but to give some advice that people get hit in this scenario, whenever you get hit into a knockdown, especially a hard knockdown, it is advised that you don't wake up with anything but to block. At least, try to see if your opponent has set up a proper safe jump. Remember, blocking one attack is not the end of the world. You have plenty of guard gauge and options to deal with your opponent's pressure. Later you'll find out which setups allow for a safe jump and which don't. Now that we talked about KOF fundamentals and some beginner tips, I'll now do an analysis of a match with 2 very high level players, Bala and Tamago, in which you'll see most of what I've talked about being applied and give reasoning to each player's decisions to give further information on how the neutral is being played. The match starts and Tamago decides to do a backdash, and Bala decides to do a full jump. After seeing that Bala landed, now's his chance for Tamago to go for a quick hop attack. But since it hit too high from the ground, it didn't combo, so they resort into neutral. Bala uses the neutral hop attack and a projectile to stand his ground, and after seeing that Tamago was holding his, he decides to go for a full jump, but Tamago reacts and does Elizabeth's anti-air special. Elizabeth is a character that can control the neutral very well, especially with the use of this special that has air invulnerability, which makes it an excellent pick against those who want to stop opponents from jumping or hopping a lot. After this, both players reset into neutral, and eventually Bala gets anti-air, but so did Tamago with the use of Robert's Dragon Punch. This shows you that even in this game, you can still get punished from jumping and even hopping a lot. Bala decides to go for a throw and Tamago takes it, following with a very quick hop attack to prevent Bala from pressing buttons after the troll tech. Eventually, Bala ends up hitting Tamago with Robert's far-reaching blowback attack and goes into his corner pressure. After Tamago tries to hit back, he proceeds to backdash, which causes Bala to whiff and grants Tamago a full combo punish. Tamago then decides to go for pressure, but gets hit by Robert's DP again, causing both players to go back to neutral. Eventually, Bala decides to go for a hop, but Tamago goes for a full jump at almost the same time. Typically, full jump attacks beat hop ones, and that is exactly what happened. However, Tamago decides to use back roll, trying to bait Robert's DP, and yet again, neutral is reset. Tamago continues to go for Elizabeth's jumping heavy kick with hops, which makes it hard to react to after a trade. Tamago anti-airs Robert once again. Bala decides to jump back this time and use Robert's dive kick, which ends up being a wave punish against Tamago, but after Tamago's back roll, which makes him have a little bit more space, and thanks to that, react to Robert's final jump. Terry comes in and Bala uses his famous far heavy kick, which is an amazing preemptive tool against people jumping, but then he decides to go for an EX bird knuckle, maybe trying to prevent Tamago from jumping or backdashing, but Tamago stands his ground this time and punishes it. After the combo is done, Bala continues to jump, but Tamago anti-airs him yet again. Tamago then decides to full jump now that Bala is in the corner, and Bala, thinking that a throw was incoming, presses forward heavy punch in hopes to take it. Sadly for Tamago, the jumping attack was too high, which granted Bala a full throw punish. This is why measuring when your jumping attacks hit is very important in KOF. After Bala's corner pressure, he decides to use Terry's blowback attack, but Tamago jumps it and gets a cross-up. This time, Tamago takes the incoming grab now that he recognized that the jumping attack hit a little bit too high. Tamago now does a guard cancel blowback attack to keep Terry in the corner, another great defensive tool that can also work as an offensive one. Bala now reads the incoming attack and proceeds to forward roll, and throws Tamago back into the corner. Tamago decides to full jump out of the corner yet again, but Bala now adapts and now punishes him. Sadly, he decides to go for a full jump to catch Elizabeth, but gets anti-aired. Bala now decides to use his neutral hop blowback attack to stand his ground and ends up hitting Tamago. Tamago now decides to use back roll several times to keep Terry away from him. Bala, trying to catch him, uses a bird knuckle but whiffed, and now he gets a whiff punish into a combo. In hopes to get Elizabeth away, he decides to use Terry's EXDP, and maybe trying to catch Tamago trying to take a throw, he uses it yet again, but Tamago blocks it and ends up killing Terry. Now you might be thinking that Bala is in a horrible position, but now he has K-Dash with 5 bars and an Elizabeth with low health. One thing to keep in mind is that the more time passes, the less health the winning player regenerates, and that each time a character dies, the loser gets a bar. Bala uses K-Dash's blowback attack that has amazing range, which ends up putting Tamago in the corner. Tamago desperately tries to press button to stop Bala's pressure, but ends up getting whiff punished and gets killed. This round now, Tamago sees K-Dash's resources and plays a little bit more patiently. Tamago tries to use Benimario's area Jinken to build meter and contest the space, but Bala was waiting patiently for this and uses K-Dash's EX slide to catch him and put him in the corner. Tamago now uses his guard cancel but the forward roll version, which ends up turning the tables of the match. K-Dash slides out of the corner, effectively reading Tamago's jump for pressure. Knowing that Tamago loves to jump out of the corner, Bala now does a preemptive heavy kick attack which converts into a combo. One great thing about K-Dash is that he has the ability to convert from hits that anti-air the opponent, which very few characters can do in this game, which grants him pressure and great corner carry. After K-Dash's pressure, Tamago jumps out and does a jumping attack into a grab. Now Benimaru goes for his light jumping kick attack, which hits K-Dash, probably thinking that it will be a cross-up. Benimaru's light kick is an excellent tool as it is not only fast, but it can cross up opponents from hops. Remember that some jumping attacks can cross up, but the same ones can't from hops in some characters, which fortunately for Benimaru, it is in his case. Sadly, Benimaru doesn't get too much after his DP ender, as Bala backdashes and evades Tamago's crunching heavy kick. After seeing it whiff, Bala instantly runs in after whiffing one of his crouching light kick. Tamago sees that it whiffs and tries to punish it, but Bala reads it and does K-Dash's Iron Trigger with a launcher follow-up, which ends up getting him the kill. Iron Trigger is K-Dash's main tool. This does a move that can hit opponents in a close range and have multiple follow-ups, an anti-air attack that can launch opponents, a projectile, a hard knockdown dealing move that can also eat and deflect projectiles, and a teleport, each with a different purpose and counterplay. Final round starts and Tamago uses a full neutral jump to prevent Bala from going in. Bala does K-Dash's Iron Trigger that ends up whiffing. Seeing this, Tamago uses Rockfire Heavy Punch attack and goes for pressure, but Bala blocks it patiently and they both go back into neutral. Now that Bala has the meter but not the life lead, he now uses his Iron Trigger projectile follow-up to put pressure on Tamago from afar, and runs in now that he sees Tamago is backing up. Tamago now decides to go for a full jump early blowback attack in an effort to alter his movement, but Bala does an amazing read and crouches, which causes the blowback attack to whiff and effectively getting a full combo punish. After his corner pressure, Tamago sees one more Iron Trigger but reads that Bala won't do the follow-up, which is why he decides to hit back. After waiting patiently, Bala goes for a neutral jump attack in an effort to catch Tamago jumping out of the corner like he used to, but Tamago now adapts and goes for a hyper hop. Tamago tries to anti-air it, but since it was a hyper hop, one which is horizontally faster, it ends up whiffing. Had he gone for a normal hop, maybe Bala could have anti-aired with K-Dash's crouching heavy punch, but sadly, Tamago drops the combo. After a short hop from Tamago, Bala tries to go for the same, seeing that Tamago isn't in range to hit him. Tamago trades with him, but since K-Dash will have some time to recover, means that now he has time to go for pressure. Bala desperately tries to wake up backdash in an effort to evade Rock's low attacks, but Tamago uses his far heavy punch instead, which ends up getting the final killing combo. Hope my explanation on how KOF Neutral works and how it is not random helped you understand a little more about the game. If you are interested in playing it, there are several Discord for the players with different skill levels, and also you can join my Discord where I give completely free coaching sessions and replay reviews for everyone. Just hit me up via DM, in Twitter, Discord, my Twitch, or even in the comments and we can schedule one. I'll leave my socials below, including my Discord server. Remember that there are a lot of guides in this game already, and I will link some of them below. And if you're wondering which characters suit you best and don't want to spend too much time in the training mode or playing them just to see if they fit you, you can check my character overview guide where I explain all the characters including the DLC. Making these videos take a lot of effort and resources, so I would appreciate if you press the like button and comment on it. You can also subscribe if you're interested in more KOF 15 guides. If you have any questions or recommendations for a video, just comment it and I'll do my best to deliver. See you on the next one!